Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I pedaled for almost 2 hours, with no particular destination in mind. The late autumn wind bit at my face, but it did nothing to ease the tightness constricting my chest. It felt like a band of iron, squeezing with every push of the pedals, with every thought that cycled through my head. The rhythmic motion of my legs, however, helped to organize the chaos. It gave me a beat to sink my thoughts to. In my mind, I replayed the last few months. Scenes cut short, phrases left hanging in the air, unfinished, glances that darted away the moment our eyes met, hugs that felt mechanical, like the dutiful embrace of a stranger. I knew. Deep down, in that quiet place you try to ignore, I had known for a while. As much as I had postponed this confrontation, telling myself it was just stress, or my own imagination, or the simple wear and tear of a long marriage, that day had finally arrived. The knowing was no longer a whisper, it was a roar. I turned my bike around and headed home, my body tired, my legs burning, but my mind clear. A decision had settled within me, heavy and solid like a stone. The key turning in the lock sounded unnaturally loud in the silence of the house. As the door swung open, the quiet rushed out to greet me. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of an empty home. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, thick with unspoken words and unanswered questions. Clara was in the dining room. She was just sitting at the table, her hands resting on the dark wood surface, her eyes fixed on some undefined point on the far wall. She wasn't reading. Her phone was nowhere in sight. She was simply existing in the stillness. She didn't even pretend to be surprised when she saw me walk in, still in my cycling gear. It was as if she, too, knew that this moment was inevitable, that the clock had finally run out on our charade. I dropped my keys onto the sideboard. The clatter of metal on wood was a sharp, intrusive sound that made her flinch. I walked slowly toward her, my cycling shoes clicking softly on the hardwood floor. She stood up quickly, a flicker of a smile trying to form on her lips. But the expression died before it was ever truly born. It was a ghost of a smile, a memory of what used to be. "Julian, you were gone a long time," she started, her voice thin. I held up a hand, a gesture asking for silence. My body was exhausted, but my resolve had never been stronger. "We don't need to do this, Clara," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. Each syllable seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. "There's no reason for an argument." I told her I had been watching, that I had noticed something was wrong for weeks, for months, even. I admitted that I had tried to pretend it was all in my head, that I was the one being distant, the one imagining things. I mentioned the children. I spoke about Isla, how she had started asking why mommy was always on her phone late at night. I mentioned Milo, especially Milo, who at 10 years old had started asking questions far too difficult for his age. Questions like, "Dad, are you and Mom still best friends?" A child shouldn't have to ask that. A child should just know. Clara still tried to find a way to deny it. Her eyes searched my face for an escape route, a crack in my certainty. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, her hands twisting in front of her. "We've just been busy. Stressed." I let the silence hang between us for a moment before I played my final card. I looked directly into her eyes, the same eyes I had fallen in love with 15 years ago, and I took away her last line of defense. "Garrett," I said, just his name. And then, the ground seemed to disappear from beneath her feet, the last bit of strength drained from her body. She collapsed back into the chair, not gracefully, but like a puppet whose strings had been cut. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders beginning to shake with silent sobs. I pulled out the other dining chair and sat down across from her, the heavy table a barrier between the life we had built and the ruins it had become. The confrontation was over. Now, it was time for the fallout. "I'm not here to yell," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not here to cry, or to ask you why. I'm here to finalize what ended a long time ago." Her sobs were muffled by her hands. It was a sound of defeat, not of remorse. "Not yet." I told her that the divorce papers were with my lawyer, ready to be signed. I explained that I had waited. I had waited for a confession, for an honest conversation, for any sign that she respected me enough to tell me the truth. But all I had received was silence, poorly rehearsed excuses, and the lingering scent of another man's cologne on a scarf she thought I wouldn't notice. She finally lowered her hands. Her face was blotchy and streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a desperate, pleading look. She tried to justify the unjustifiable. She talked about the wear and tear of marriage. the routine, the emotional absence she felt from me, my long hours at work, my quiet nature. She spoke of her internal confusion, of feeling lost, of not knowing who she was anymore outside of being a wife and a mother. I listened to everything attentively, without interrupting. I let her speak her piece, not because it would change anything, but because I felt she needed to hear the weakness of her own reasons out loud. When she finished, her words hanging in the tense air between us, I responded firmly. Every couple faces difficulties, Clara. Every single one. We all face routine. We all feel lost sometimes. But cheating is a choice. It's not an accident that happens to you on the way to the grocery store. You had time. You had opportunities. You had my trust, and you chose to lie. Every single day. As I spoke, I realized something surprising. The anger I had expected to feel, the white-hot rage, it wasn't there. In its place was a profound sense of relief. It was as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying was finally being lifted from my shoulders. The weight of suspicion. The weight of pretending. The weight of living a lie I wasn't even a part of. Clara cried harder, shaking her head as if trying to erase everything with that desperate gesture. But what was done was done. I stood up, went to my home office, and returned with a thick manila folder. I placed it on the table between us. It landed with a soft, definitive thud. These are the documents, I explained. They are already signed by me. All that's needed is your signature to make everything official. We can do this amicably, for the kids. I'm not going to fight you on the house or the finances. I just want this to be over. She stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. Please, Julian, she begged, her voice cracking. Give me more time. Let's talk more. Let's go to counseling. There has to be a chance. I looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the woman I married. But then, I saw the faces of my children. I saw Milo's lost expression, Isla's worried frown. Even if I wanted to pretend there was something left to save, I said softly, our children's eyes have already shown me that the end is necessary. They deserve to live in a home built on truth, not on whispers and secrets. It was at that moment that she seemed to truly understand the gravity of the situation. She wasn't just losing her husband. She was losing the trust of her children. And I could see in her eyes that this pain was deeper, sharper than she had ever imagined. I took a deep breath. I'll leave the documents with you, I said, my voice gentler now. I'll be back at the end of the week for a final answer. Before leaving the room, I paused. I looked at the woman who was once the love of my life, the center of my world. I don't hate you, Clara, I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. But I've learned to love myself enough not to accept being deceived. I walked out of the dining room, picked up the small bag I had packed earlier that morning, and left without looking back. The click of the front door closing behind me was the final punctuation mark on a chapter of my life. I checked into a hotel a few towns over. The room was sterile, impersonal, painted in bland shades of beige. It was perfect. It was a blank slate. As I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, the silence of the room was a comfort. It wasn't the heavy, accusatory silence of my home. It was just emptiness, a space to breathe. 2 days passed in a blur of numb routine. Work, gym, tasteless room service. On the third night, as I was staring blankly at a television screen, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I expected it to be Clara, or my sister, or a work email, but it was a message from an unknown number. It was short, but direct. I'm Naomi, Garrett's wife. Can we talk? I read the message once, twice, 3 times. It was as if someone had suddenly lit a match in a pitch-black room, where there had only been my own shadows. Now there was the possibility of a shared light, a shared darkness. I typed back a simple reply, yes. I suggested a discreet coffee shop, far from either of our neighborhoods. A neutral ground, a place where we were just 2 anonymous people sharing a table. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting in a booth in the corner. She was holding a large coffee cup with both hands, as if for warmth, though the cafe was comfortably heated. She looked tired, the way I felt deep in my bones, but she held herself with a firm, dignified posture. When she saw me approach, she lifted her gaze. Her eyes were intelligent, and filled with a sorrow that I recognized instantly. It was like looking into a mirror. In that single, silent moment of connection, we both knew. We were standing in front of the one person in the world who understood exactly what the other was feeling, without a single word needing to be spoken. "Julian?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "Naomi," I confirmed, sliding into the booth across from her. We sat in silence for a few seconds. There was no rush. The story we shared was a marathon, not a sprint. The waitress came and I ordered a black coffee. When she left, Naomi finally spoke. She began almost as if she were confessing to a diary, her eyes focused on the swirling steam from her cup. She said she had suspected for months. Garrett was spending more and more time at work. His phone, once left casually on the counter, was now always on silent, face down, or in his pocket. The hugs that used to feel natural and all-encompassing now seemed forced, perfunctory. She found deleted messages. She saw a quick notification with Clara's name flash across his screen one evening. From there, she started piecing things together, but she needed confirmation. She needed to know she wasn't going crazy. When she finally discovered that I was Clara's husband, through a tagged photo on a mutual friend's social media, she felt an overwhelming urge to reach out. Not for revenge, she explained, but for validation. For sanity. I listened attentively, nodding in all the right places, because her story was my story. The details were different, but the melody was the same. When she finished, I shared what I knew. I spoke about the changes in Clara, the lame excuses about needing a girls' night on a Tuesday, the nights she claimed she was too tired to talk, only for me to see the faint glow of her phone screen under the covers long after I'd turned off my light, the absences that started to seem strategic, planned around my work schedule. We had both been navigating the same treacherous waters, in separate boats, in the same storm. It was as if our lives had been unraveled by the same script, written by two people who preferred the intricate, exhausting work of betrayal over the simple, terrifying honesty of saying, "I'm not happy." Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. She slid it across the table. "I don't know why I brought these," she said quietly. "I guess I just needed someone else to see them, to know that this was real." Inside were a few pieces of evidence. A credit card statement showing duplicated dinners at romantic restaurants she'd never been to. An old screenshot of a confusing, overly familiar message she had managed to glimpse on his phone. A photo a friend had unknowingly taken at a local event, showing Garrett in the background, his arm resting just a little too comfortably on the back of Clara's chair. I looked at them, not with anger, but with a quiet, somber confirmation. The ghosts of my suspicions now had faces and names and dates. I pushed the envelope back to her. "I filled out the divorce papers 2 days ago," I said. She looked at me, a flicker of surprise in her tired eyes. "I haven't decided what to do yet," she admitted. "We don't have children. It would be a clean break, but it's still my life." The conversation, which had started tense and heavy, gradually turned into a sincere, almost therapeutic exchange. Naomi said she felt shame and anger, but also a strange sense of relief. It was as if the worst had already happened, and now all that was left was to decide how to rebuild. I agreed completely. We talked about how it felt like being pushed off a cliff we didn't even know we were standing on. The world we had planned, the future we had envisioned, had shattered. All that remained was the cracked ground of broken promises. But even so, sitting there, sharing that pain with someone who understood every nuance, every unspoken fear, it was comforting. No, not comforting. That wasn't the right word. It was grounding. It made the pain real, tangible, and therefore, manageable. It wasn't just my private nightmare anymore. At the end of our meeting, which had stretched for nearly 2 hours, Naomi thanked me for agreeing to talk. "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "Thank you. It's hard to deal with everything alone." We walked together to the parking lot. The late afternoon sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the pavement. Before getting into her car, she turned to me. "If you ever need to talk again," she said, "you'll know how to find me." I nodded, not promising anything. But in the days that followed, we continued exchanging messages. Sometimes they were short check-ins. "How are you holding up?" Sometimes they were longer, more detailed accounts of the emotional setbacks, the bureaucratic headaches of separation, the sheer exhaustion of it all. It was a type of conversation that didn't require filters. No statement was judged. No feeling was too messy. It was a lifeline in a sea of emotional turmoil. A week after I had left home, my phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice trembled on the other end. My first instinct was to hang up, to not let her pull me back into the vortex of her drama. But I took a deep breath and listened. She said she hadn't signed the papers yet. She said she missed the routine, my presence in the house, the smell of the coffee I made every morning. It was a carefully curated list of comforts, not a confession of love. She was mourning the life she had lost, not the man. "Please, just come back," she insisted, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "Garrett is in the past. It's over. I don't want any more contact with him. We can try to rebuild. For the sake of the family. The kids need stability. They needed honesty," I thought. But I didn't say it. There was no point. I remained silent on my end of the line. She took my silence as an invitation to continue, her pleas growing more frantic. When she finally ran out of words, I didn't respond to her arguments. I simply said, "I'll come by tomorrow afternoon," and hung up before she could reply. The following day, I knocked on the door of my own home. It felt strange, like visiting a place from a past life. Clara answered, her eyes marked by sleepless nights, her face visibly anxious. She moved to hug me, but I took a small step back. I wasn't there for her. "I came to talk to Isla and Milo," I said, my voice gentle but firm. She stepped aside without arguing, her shoulders slumping in defeat. The kids were on the couch in the living room, playing a video game. The sounds of cheerful digital music filled the tense silence. I knelt in front of them, and my heart ached. They were the innocent casualties in a war they hadn't started. I spoke with as much calm as I could muster. I explained that Dad would be living in another house now. I told them that this didn't change the love I felt for them, not one bit, and that I would always be nearby. Milo bit his lip and just nodded, his eyes wide with a lost look that shattered me. Isla, ever the practical one, asked, "Will we still have pizza and movie night on Fridays?" "Every single Friday," I promised, my voice thick with emotion. "That's our thing. It will never change." I asked them to take care of their mom, to be kind to her, even if they had doubts or were sad. I hugged them both tightly, burying my face in their hair, trying not to break down right there. I held on, trying to pour a lifetime of love and reassurance into that single, desperate embrace. Clara, leaning against the wall, was crying silently. When I stood up, she walked over to me, her face a mask of regret. She tried to argue one last time. She said she was deeply sorry for everything, that she would get rid of Garrett, that she would do anything to rebuild my trust. She apologized for every wrong choice, every lie, every silence. She extended a hand, hoping for some reaction, any sign that there was still room in my heart for her. I looked at the woman with whom I had shared years of my life, dreams, and 2 beautiful children. And for a moment, a flicker of a second, I thought about how everything could have been different. But that moment passed. The trust was gone. It had been ground into dust by months of deceit. You can't rebuild a house when the foundation has been turned to sand. I walked to the door. Before leaving, I turned back to her one last time. "I hope you find peace, Clara," I said. She tried to say something else, but I had already closed the door behind me. And outside, in the crisp afternoon air, I didn't look back. The divorce went through without any surprises. Clara signed the papers. A few weeks later, I received the confirmation via email. It was just a digital document, a PDF file, but that simple notification carried the symbolic weight of absolute closure. That same evening, Naomi and I had a video call. She told me she had finalized her own process. Garrett hadn't resisted, signing everything quickly, eager to move on. She was officially separated, too. We looked at each other through the screen, 2 faces in separate boxes, connected by a shared history of pain. No one celebrated. There was no joy in this. But we both understood, in that silent gaze, that we were ready for the next step, whatever it might be. After that, Naomi and I began to see each other more frequently. At first, it was always as adults, navigating a shared landscape of grief. We had coffee together. We took long walks in parks. The crunch of autumn leaves under our feet, a constant rhythm to our conversations. Sometimes, we would just talk for hours on the phone. We discussed the kids, the tough days, the emotional ambushes that still surfaced in unexpected waves. A song on the radio, a familiar restaurant, a shared memory that now felt tainted. Over time, I started to realize how much I looked forward to our talks. Her presence was calming. Her perspective was grounding. She never offered cheap platitudes. She just listened. And she understood. Slowly, Carefully, I began to let her into the parts of my life that involved my children. I was fiercely protective of them, and the last thing I wanted was to cause more confusion or rush a process that needed to be experienced calmly. Naomi only got to know Isla and Milo more closely weeks later. Before that, they had only seen her from a distance at the park once, when we crossed paths by what looked like chance, but which I had tentatively arranged. The first real meeting happened on a weekend when I decided to take the kids to a large bookstore downtown. It was one of our favorite traditions. I casually invited Naomi, making it clear there were no expectations. "Just come along if you feel like it," I'd said. She accepted, but made it clear she would just accompany us, without interfering, and she was true to her word. During the outing, she mostly observed. She let me be the father. She didn't try to force conversations or win them over. When Isla held up a fantasy book she loved, chattering excitedly about the plot, Naomi simply smiled and said, "I've read that one, too." The ending was so surprising. That was enough to start a small, natural conversation between them. Milo, still reserved, just watched her. He observed her every move with a quiet intensity, as if trying to solve a puzzle. After that day, when I had the kids back at my new apartment, I asked them what they thought of her. Isla, always direct, said, "I liked her. She reads good books." Milo just shrugged his shoulders, his eyes on his video game. "She seems nice," was all he offered. I understood it was still too early to create any expectations, and Naomi knew that, too. That's why in the following meetings, she continued to avoid any gesture that could be interpreted as intrusive. She was just present, without forcing connections, without seeking approval. She respected their space, their loyalty to their mother, and their grief, and that ended up making all the difference. Over time, the kids began to open up spontaneously. Naomi started being included in small activities. A walk in the park. Pizza on Friday nights at my place. Isla began asking her questions about her job, her hobbies. Milo, still suspicious, once challenged her directly. "Do you know how to play chess?" he asked, his tone almost accusatory. Naomi smiled gently. "No, I don't," she replied honestly, "but I'd love to learn." He promised to teach her. And he did. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, they played together on the floor of my living room. He beat her easily, of course, and as he checkmated her queen, he smiled. A real, genuine smile, directed right at her. It was the first time I had seen it. I observed everything discreetly, my heart swelling with a cautious optimism. I didn't want to rush anything, but it was impossible to ignore how Naomi's presence brought a lightness to days that had once felt so heavy. The real breakthrough came on an ordinary Saturday afternoon. The four of us went for a bike ride on a trail by the river. As we stopped for a water break, I noticed that Milo had asked Naomi to hold his water bottle while he tied his shoe. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but for a reserved, wounded boy like him, it was huge. It was a gesture of trust. Isla, on the other hand, already treated Naomi with a casual familiarity, sometimes even sharing quick, whispered secrets about school or asking for advice on a drawing she was working on. That connection, built with so much care, with so much patience, was gradually shaping a new form of family. It had no obligations, no titles. It was just built on genuine, quiet affection. Sometimes, I would find myself smiling alone when I saw the three of them together, talking or laughing. It was like watching a beautiful quilt being sewn together, stitch by stitch, not with haste, but with a firmness and care that promised it would last. The past still left its marks, like faint scars that would never fully disappear. But it was no longer the protagonist of our story. It was just the prologue. I learned from a mutual acquaintance that Clara and Garrett had run into each other by chance at a cafe downtown. It wasn't planned. She had walked in to grab a coffee, and there he was, sitting at a corner table, looking at his phone with an expression that the acquaintance described as a mix of exhaustion and indifference. According to the story, she sat down with him. They talked for a few minutes. I could only imagine the conversation, the awkward silences, the weight of two destroyed families hanging between them. Naomi had told me that Garrett was moving to another state. He didn't have kids, so there were no strings attached. He could just pack up his guilt and start over somewhere new. A clean break. For Clara, it wasn't that simple. A couple of months after the divorce was finalized, Naomi and I took the kids on a picnic. It was a beautiful, Sunny day. We spread a blanket on the grass, ate sandwiches, and threw a frisbee. It was simple, it was normal, it was happy. Naomi took a picture of us. Isla and Milo were laughing, caught mid-motion, and Naomi and I were standing behind them, smiling. Later that evening, I posted it on my social media. I rarely posted anything, but that day felt different. It felt like a milestone. The caption was simple. A good day. I didn't think much of it, but a week later, I received a frantic call from my sister. Julian, are you okay? Clara has been calling me non-stop. She's a complete mess. What happened? I asked, a sense of dread creeping in. She saw the picture, my sister said softly. The one from the picnic. Someone showed it to her. She never imagined, you and her. I hung up the phone and sat in silence. I imagined Clara, alone in her house, scrolling through her phone and stumbling upon that image. That image of me, her ex-husband, building a new life with the wife of the man she cheated on me with. It was cruel, it was symbolic, and in a way I couldn't deny. A way that felt like cosmic justice. It was fair. The pain she must have felt, I realized, wasn't just jealousy. It was the crushing weight of consequence. It was the shame, the regret, the complete and utter helplessness of knowing she had authored her own misery. I hadn't just moved on. I was building a new, happy life on the very foundations she had destroyed, and I was doing it with the one person in the world who truly understood the depth of the betrayal as I did. The one person who, like me, had chosen dignity over deceit. I felt a pang of something that might have been pity, but it was distant. Her choices had led her to her own private island of regret, and I was no longer the one responsible for rescuing her from it. That image, I knew, would stay etched in her mind for a long time. It wasn't just a picture of four smiling people at a park. It was the reflection of the real cost of her choices. In the months that followed, life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. The contrast between my new world and the echoes I heard of Clara's old one was stark. Friends told me she was struggling. She avoided leaving the house. She had lost weight. My own children grew more distant from her. Isla, hurt and confused, had quietly blocked her mother's contact on social media. Milo's text message responses to her were short, emotionless sentences. Yes, no, I'm fine. She didn't know how to reach them anymore, because she had broken the bridge of trust that connected them. One afternoon, my sister told me another story. Clara had gone to Isla's school, waiting outside the gates, presumably just to see her. She waited for over an hour. When she finally saw Isla coming out, her heart must have leaped. But Isla wasn't alone. Naomi was with her, carrying her heavy backpack, and the two of them were laughing about something Isla had said. They walked together with an easy familiarity, an affection that couldn't be faked. My sister said Clara just stood there, frozen, as she watched them get into my car and drive away, completely unaware that she was watching. That was the moment, my sister believed, that Clara finally understood. The space that was once hers hadn't just been vacated, it had been filled. On our side of the story, Naomi and I had built something quiet and strong. Nothing was forced, nothing was for show. It was just true. Naomi never tried to replace anyone. She was brilliant in that way. She respected the memory of the family that had existed before, but she dedicated herself with an honest, gentle heart to the new story we were forming. And I, for my part, was relearning what it meant to share my days with someone who looked me in the eye with clarity. Someone who didn't hide secrets behind tired smiles. We completed each other in the silences, in the shared understanding that mature love doesn't always come from chaotic intensity, but from a deep and abiding peace. One ordinary Tuesday night, our new life crystallized in a way I'll never forget. Naomi was at the kitchen table, helping Isla with a school project on the solar system. They were laughing as they tried to get Saturn's rings to stay glued on. I was on the couch, reading. Milo was sitting on the floor nearby, scribbling something on a sheet of paper. After a few minutes, he got up and approached me, holding the paper out. He seemed hesitant. "It's for English class," he mumbled. "It's a free essay, about a person you admire." I took the paper, curious, and began to read. It was about me. It was about how he thought I was strong when everything seemed lost. About how I never stopped being a father, even when everything turned upside down. He wrote, in his 10-year-old scrawl, "My dad taught me that even when things break, you can build something new. You just have to be honest and kind." I tried to hide my emotion, but my voice faltered as I read the last line aloud. My eyes welled up. Naomi, who had been watching from the kitchen table, walked over and gently touched my hand. It was a simple gesture, but it said everything. It said, "I see you. I'm here. We're in this together." Later, after the kids were in bed, Naomi and I sat side by side on the couch, the house quiet around us. "I never imagined I could live something like this again," I said into the stillness. "After everything." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Me neither," she replied softly. "But maybe that's what makes it so special. It wasn't planned. It wasn't a fairy tale we dreamed of. It was something that grew out of the chaos. And it blossomed because it was real." We looked at each other, and in that silent, comfortable gaze, there was more understanding, more love, than in any grand declaration. We didn't need to make promises for the future. We simply knew we were exactly where we were supposed to be. That same night, on the other side of the city, Clara was alone in a rented apartment. A friend later told me she had seen a picture someone else had shared online. It was from Isla's small birthday party a few days prior. In the photo, I was standing next to the kids as they blew out their candles. Naomi was beside them, her arm around Isla, all of them caught in the warm glow of the cake. Everyone was smiling. The caption was simple. One word, family. This time, our friend said, Clara didn't cry. She just closed the app and sat there in the dark. It was final. The love, the family, the life she once had, she had destroyed it with her own hands. And now, all that was left was to learn how to live with the absence she herself had chosen. Meanwhile, I slept with a peace I hadn't known in years. And Naomi, for the first time since her world had fallen apart, slept soundly beside me. Because sometimes, the strongest new beginnings are born from the most painful of endings. We weren't chasing a happy ending anymore. We were living, day by day, a new story. And this time, there were no lies, no masks, only the quiet, steady respect that every true love needs to endure.